So the first thing is show me your SAS-7 Type 2 report or SSA-16. If a provider doesn't have this, they shouldn't be providing PCI or HIPAA compliant hosting. It's certainly not a prerequisite to provide HIPAA or PCI compliant hosting, but it is the hallmark of a well-run hosting operation. I know that some of the larger providers will not release their report to clients, which I think is a mistake and ultimately something that has caused slower adoption within the cloud industry, because auditors are going to want to be able to take this report and put it with their other audit reports and say, we've audited this company. And if they can't have an audited report that includes the cloud provider, that's a hole in that process. How we design a compliant infrastructure. Anybody that's providing PCI or HIPAA compliance should be able to give a nice Visio to their client and say, this is what your infrastructure is going to look like. Here's how we maintain HIPAA and PCI compliance. Everything from network security and firewalling down to separate servers or separate functions. What is the client responsible for and what is the vendor responsible for? This is one of the most misunderstood things we get from clients. They'll say, hey, you guys, PCI compliance, you're going to take care of that for me, right? No. It is still the client's responsibility to maintain a PCI compliant environment. We give clients full root access to servers like most providers do. Ultimately a client can go in and say, you know what, I don't like the way that antivirus works. It slows things down when it goes out and checks all those files. I'm going to turn that off. Well, all of a sudden, they violated one of the things they should be doing from a security standpoint. It was a decision they made. We'll warn them. We'll say, hey, you shouldn't have done that. We'll pick it up in an audit. We'll send them an email. We'll say, you shouldn't have done that again. But ultimately, it's their decision to make. Show me your privacy policy, especially around HIPAA. Who owns data? How do you release that data? How do you notify people of data loss? All important features of a privacy policy. What's your SLA? And while it's technically not something that's required for compliance, a strong SLA is really important. And I wrote a blog post on the Amazon outages the Amazon outage from I guess a couple months ago at this point. And one of the things that people were really upset about was that depending on what type of outage you had and what services you were subscribing to, it wasn't an SLA creditable event. Because the people hadn't bought the right series of packages for it to be an SLA creditable event. And people don't dig into the SLA. They just assume that, hey, it's there and it covers me. But there's a reason there's a full page to describe what an SLA does and does not cover. And that full page of stuff is all exclusionary for the client. I know in our SLA we've got full page of stuff too, and some of it's pretty obvious, like you can't have caused an SLA outage yourself. But we wrote that in there because we had a guy try to claim it. He's like, hey, my servers are down. I'm like, yeah, you did that. And he's like, okay, so do I get a credit? I'm like, what are you talking about? But that happens. I mean, you assume that everybody's a reasonable, rational business person, and that's not the case. How do you maintain a secure environment? Again, a company that provides PCI or HIPAA compliant services should have a chief security officer, and that chief security officer should be able to get on the phone with the client or their chief security officer or their auditor and describe exactly what we do and how we do it to maintain a secure environment. Generally we'll require an NDA for that because we're given a lot of information about specifics on how we do things. But that's again a reasonable thing that you do to maintain security, and most security conscious clients will understand that.